Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Sabbath Collective, a community of people interested in celebrating the Sabbath and pursuing God through a Hebraic worldview. So tonight, we love you back. Hey, Evald. Hey, Sissy. Good to have you with us. Good to see everyone. Tonight, we're going to talk about something I think all of us are feeling right about now. Hey, Rye. Good to see you, son. 7 a.m. it is. Good for you. You're up over there in Taiwan. Great to have you with us. Not sure if Neetz and Lahava are with you too. Hey, Sissy, good to see you. Tonight's talk, quarantined with a rage monster. So I normally, not normally, but a lot of times before I talk about something, I kind of go online and see what other therapists or sociologists or pastors or rabbis or Buddhist monks are saying to their people in this time of stress. Crazy rage out there. Oh yeah, Kate's saying crazy rage. Absolutely. And most people seem to still be talking about fear. But in our community and with the people that I know, and then Kate is saying she's seeing it out there too. Hey, Diana, good to have you with us. Shabbat Shalom. The people I know probably just hung out at fear maybe in week 1 of all this and then went straight to anger. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Just straight to anger. And that's where they're all parked now. And when I say they all, that's where we're all parked now. Right at anger. I think we all know there is an explosive element in anger. And just to qualify, anger on the side of uncontrollable rage is what we're talking about, the hurtful kind, rather than a kind of righteous anger that provokes to action. We're actually going to be talking about that next week so that we don't think all anger is not good or needs to be in some way managed. There's a good kind of anger that provokes us to action. So tonight we're going to be talking about the ragey kind. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Wise Buddha saying there. You are the one who gets burned. Like an incinerator, this kind of rage can literally burn you up. Certainly, science can quantify the physical toll it can take on our bodies. Anger can also incinerate community. And let me see thumbs up if you're feeling this, especially when we get into the points, or if there's a particular area that you really struggle with or see other people that you love struggle with. Hey, Aaron, great to have you join us. Shabbat Shalom in Canada. So we wield emotionally charged words like weapons sometimes. And in these new times, our communities are mostly virtual now, meaning without the accountability of face-to-face, our words are misunderstood at best and weaponized at worst. So it's a very serious time that we're in with anger. And of course, the obvious, we're all stressed. Proverbs 15:18 says, hot-tempered people stir up strife. Now, this is a really interesting verse. What these Hebrew words mean here, strife is the Hebrew word madon, and it means contention. And the word stir is the Hebrew word gara, and it means to cause it or to excite it. But it also suggests it's kind of already there. It's just that this contentious person, this person who's hot-tempered, stirs up what's already there and makes a stressful situation even worse. What's stirred up comes to the surface, and then it kind of creates this soup of mess. Now, let me give you an example of this that just happened to me maybe 2 weeks ago. A U.S. politician that I do not trust, let alone respect, used the term Chinese virus for this coronavirus. Now, coming from him, this instantly stirred up all kinds of anger in me because pretty much anything that comes out of the man's mouth stirs up anger in me. But again, already seeing racist actions against Asians in this time, upset about what I see in my own country with racism. And then on the personal side, my daughter in law and granddaughter being Asian, and my son and my daughter in law and my granddaughter living in Taiwan, I manifested a bit of the rage monster when this man used that phrase. So I'm later on the phone and I'm doing some phone counseling, and I asked the person that I'm talking to how he's doing. And he says back to me, this virus from China, this is how he prefaces it. And I interrupt him and say something along the lines of, well, actually, when you see the pathogen evolution on sites like nextstrain.org, you'll see although the first strain did come from Wuhan, the first strains that came to the US actually were mutations of that and came from Europe. And he responds after I go through this little aside, okay. He didn't understand what he just felt from me, but it made him stop talking. And when I realized how awkward that was, I simply said, sorry, a bit sensitive to that phrase. What did you mean when you said that? And his point was actually going to be something that seems so far away and would never touch us across the world, can reach us, which was leaving him feeling really vulnerable and unable to protect his family. So, but I almost didn't get to what he meant because I turned into a rage monster. So he didn't see the face of that monster because hopefully I'm professional enough to not be a full-blown crazy person, but he did sense an energy, and that stopped him from talking. And for a minute, my rage monster impacted another person's health. And it was by that person stirring up strife, right? Stirring up contention. It was already there, but the words stirred it up. The dangerous energy of anger can be stirred up in us by a carrier, like what happens a lot, and it can have collateral damage. Also, living with an explosively angry person takes its toll almost the same way it does in the rage monster of him or herself. So, let's talk about what this looks like realistically. Hey, Randall, great to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Hey, Faith. Again, we love you. We're so sorry for your loss. John Rosa, so good to see you. Shabbat Shalom to you and to Jackie. Hey, Glendalise, great to have you join us. And if O'Dane is there as well, good to have you with us. So, there was a well-known child therapist who authored parenting books instructing parents to allow children to express their anger in any way they wanted so that kids didn't bottle it up. Okay, there's some gray areas there. Someone wrote to the therapist recently and said, when my brother was young, he was told to kick something soft when he got angry. He's 32 now, and he kicks his wife. Uncontrolled venting of anger is not the best way. Not the best way. Kate saying, welcome to Crystal Kennedy. Good to have you, Crystal. Again, this is something that we kind of veered off into in the past. And uncontrolled venting of anger is not the best way. Actually, when it comes to anger, it's not don't, it's how. It's not don't, it's how. And that's very important. So it's not that we say we shouldn't have anger. It's more how we manage anger. And the more you lose control to anger completely, like that little boy who was told to kick something soft and never did learn how to manage anger or handle anger, and then felt like it was okay to physically abuse his wife. Domestic violence is all about that. The more your brain is programmed to only releasing anger through these ways, the more that pattern is set. And anger's expression can carry a desensitization to it. Do you ever know somebody and maybe you love them, maybe they're part of your family, and that person just goes from 0 to 100 and just pops off and starts screaming at everybody and says all kinds of terrible, insensitive, hurtful stuff. And then after it's over, they calm down and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry. You know how I am. You know how I get when I get angry." Here's the thing. It's good to not stuff anger down, but it is also good to not allow free reign or expression of anger. And again, when I use this term anger, I'm talking more on the uncontrollable kind of anger, which is rage. Unmanaged anger is rage. And again, next week we'll talk about righteous anger and how to do something positive with intention and what comes through that righteous anger. But tonight, we'll look at how to navigate anger that can turn us into a monster. And how many people have felt like these times that we're in, give me a thumbs up, really have brought up that rage monster in us? Obviously for the reasons, right? We all understand why. But there really is a lot of the rage monster coming out in us. Adrian, great to see you. Good to have you join us, honey. Again, more Cali people. I love that. What are some signs of unhealthy anger? And again, we're going to talk about this is how you know you've gotten off track, okay? And the first sign is a desire for vengeance, a desire for vengeance. And that's inflicted in retaliation for an injury or an offense. And this is something that we see really commonly. We all kind of will go there if we allow ourselves to go there. You get angry at someone and you want revenge. You want them to suffer the same way you did or the same way they made somebody suffer. And this is a very normal and real human response. Proverbs 24, 28, 29 says, "Don't be a witness against your neighbor for no reason. Would you use your lips to deceive? Don't say, 'I'll do to him what he did to me. I'll pay him back what his deeds deserve.'" And then here's another verse. "You shall not take revenge." So what this text is saying is just because somebody did you wrong, don't lie about them in court wanting the same thing to happen to them. Do not take revenge. Beth says, I wouldn't say I want vengeance. I just want them to admit how wrong they are. Yeah. And that's cool, actually. And we're going to get into that next week, Beth. There's actually, that's a fine inclination, right? So what is vengeance or wanting to take revenge? The Talmud in Yoma 23a says it like this: "Taking revenge is when you ask someone, 'Lend me your sickle,' and he says no. The next day he comes to you and asks you, 'Lend me your hatchet,' and you respond, 'I am not lending to you, just like you did not lend to me.'" So again, this is a very ancient text that explains to us how we apply the laws of God. And it gives this example. If you ask for something and they say no, and they come back to you and ask you, you say no, you didn't give it to me, I'm not giving it to you. It is wanting to see done to the person the wrong they did to another. Now, in Judaism, you are commanded to help those in the community if you can do so. So this kind of vengeance behavior is actually breaking religious laws to execute personal revenge. And that's problematic. So let's talk about a real-time example of this. And I'm going to use another one with me where you're going to think, oh my gosh, she is out of control. Another one with me. So there are pastors who publicly held religious service, and many of them defying the laws in their states or counties and putting people in danger. And because of that, many people were getting sick, many of the elderly were getting sick, and they would spiritualize this entitlement and say, God is bigger than a virus, and the government doesn't have the right to tell me that we can't assemble, and all this BS, right? Well, at least I, as a minister, was exceptionally sensitive to this kind of ignorance, rebelliousness, entitlement, stupidity, all the other words, fill them in. And so I got upset because they're putting the people that trust them in danger. And so I really react to that internally. And at least one of these pastors actually contracted COVID-19 and died. Now, that anger monster wanted me to be happy about it. And for a hot second, I said good. That can't be good. The fact that I was to that level can't be a good and healthy thing. So we have to understand that this sense, this desire for vengeance, which is the person pays in the same way that they wrong another person, this is not only is this not up to us, but it's not healthy for us. In no way, shape, or form is it a good thing that for a hot second I say good when a person dies, right? But this is where we can go. And I'm being honest tonight. The other part that we can see in ourselves, and we know we've gotten a little off track and unhealthy. Hey, Phoebe, good to have you with us from California. Aaron's saying I found myself there often. I think we all have, right? Let's be real with this. Hey, Jules, good to see you, hon. A disproportionate response. So something happens and you really have a disproportionate response to what happens. So use a completely different example. You break up with your partner. A healthy thing is you're sad. An unhealthy thing is you try to kill them or kill yourself. Try to kill yourself, right? This is disproportionate. And the other thing that we see in this is this sort of catastrophizing. Real word, catastrophizing, which means we kind of make mountains out of it, right? We really, oh my gosh, this is the apocalypse, and this is the worst thing that ever happened in the history of happenings. We make everything a full-blown catastrophe. And in this isolation, that can really be a factor when we're living in close quarters with people that are in our family, right? Mikkel's saying it's almost instinctual. It is. It's something very deep in us. But that's okay, because there's a lot of bends that we have towards certain behaviors and thoughts that because we know that they're not good, they don't come from a place of good, we can pull back. We can recognize them. It doesn't matter if they're our first instincts, our first response. As soon as we recognize them, that's when we become accountable and can pull ourselves back from it. But very true. It is definitely almost instinctual, Mikkel. So let's give another example of this catastrophizing. So let's say you're locked in the house with your family and you decide you're going to clean out a closet. Okay, it's a mess. And you say, oh, I'm going to make this like my office storage since I'm working at home. I'm going to clean out this closet. So you clean out the closet, and then your spouse tells your kids, oh, look, there's all this room in the closet. So go ahead and put your art supplies in there so they don't make a mess in the living room and I don't trip over them. And you open up that closet you just cleaned and your head explodes, right? Literally. I mean, it's like the cartoons with the steam coming out. That is exactly what we're talking about, a disproportionate response. Anger disintegrates your ability to make good choices. Do you ever think to yourself, am I acting like an idiot when I'm angry? It's because you are acting like an idiot when you're angry. We have this kind of biochemical wave through our system stemming from our brains perceiving a threat to our lives. And the sympathetic nervous system kicks in to give you what you need to respond to that danger. Your digestive system slows down, which is why your mouth goes dry. The blood goes to your extremities. Your face goes numb. You can't think clearly. Our brains are designed to always be on the lookout for danger. Again, we've been talking about this a lot. And they move so quick to thin slice of judgment. and that we feel or experience a physical sensation before we even feel or experience an emotional one. In other words, our brains work so quick and send a message to our bodies so quick that we feel it in our bodies before we even get a chance to feel it emotionally. Now, this helped our ancestors deal with dangerous predators that wanted to eat us. The thing is, what we did previously, which is run or fight, no longer really works for us under most situations now, especially when you're trapped in the house with the family or your roommates. Dr. Daniel Siegel, hi Resh, hi Redonda. Oh, Ryan saying hey to Redonda. Hey Redonda, good to have you join us. Dr. Daniel Siegel uses the hand as a brain illustration. Redonda, I'm not sure if you're still with us or not, but Redonda does deal with post-traumatic stress. This is a really cool brain illustration that he came up with. Again, Dr. Daniel Siegel is his name. So if you want to do this with me, we can literally look at it again on our own and remind us. So make a fist like this. Okay, make a fist. Now, this is his illustration, brain illustration. The face of the person is in front, in the knuckles. This is the back of the head, in the back, towards the back of your hand. Your wrist represents the spinal cord rising up from your backbone with your brain sitting on top of it. Now, if you lift your fingers and raise your thumb, you'll see the inner brain stem represented in your palm. Then, if you put your thumb back down, you'll see the approximate location of the amygdala, which is a reactive part of your brain. Now, curl your fingers back over the top. You see that? And this is your prefrontal cortex in place. Now, this is the rational decision-making part of your brain. This part actually really doesn't fully develop until about mid-20s, which explains teenagers on the beach in Fort Lauderdale a month ago, right? So when you feel this threat response, in this case, anger may happen, your prefrontal cortex right here doesn't function because of what happens in the brain, which we just talked about, and you literally blow your top. Now, what's left? What are we seeing? The reactive part of your brain. Ryan Martin, an anger researcher, says that anger is with us in the best and the worst times of our lives. And when I read that, I thought, in the best times of our lives? But he goes on and says, yeah, the best, the birth of our children or getting a new job or creating a piece of art. He says if you look at the total experience, there will almost always have some element of anger where things almost went wrong and threatened the whole thing. But it turns out good, so we forget about the anger. And of course, in the worst times of our lives, obviously there's anger there. He says anger is not an enemy. It's like the warning lights. And I would say anger is very similar to a fever. And what do we do in our culture? We always try to give aspirin to remove the fever, but actually the fever is burning up viruses and bacteria, and it's actually doing a job. It shouldn't be ignored or removed. It should be managed. It's there for a purpose. So, what do we do when we feel the rage monster? So now that we see how we know that we've gotten off track, what do we do when we feel that monster come over us? And I'm going to get into 4 things tonight. Now, when we talk about these, there can be more, there can be different ones. People have all kinds, sorry, my little candle tipped over there. People can have all kinds of things that work for them. I'm just going to talk about 4 that feel like they happen to be working during this time that we're in, but you may find more or less or different ones. The first one is confess. Confess that you got a rage monster. And that's an act of vulnerability, to share this with somebody you trust. Being vulnerable seems counterintuitive to letting go of a fight or flight. But it's kind of like hormesis, which is my new favorite word and what I'm constantly seeing in the world. Hormesis is where something that can be seen as negative actually makes everything from a plant to a human stronger. This beautiful tension in the opposites that causes growth and health. So when you confess, hey, I am losing it over here, that's an act of vulnerability. And just being vulnerable actually begins to stop that cycle, that pattern of the anger, of the rage. It's an important step. Hey, O'Dane, thank you. Drag them, Aaron's saying. Hey, Evelyn, good to see you, hon. Great to have you with us. The next thing is breathe. Now, I know that you hear this over and over again. People say it all the time. First confess, then breathe. And breathe seems so like, okay, duh. You get upset and people tell you, take a breath, breathe. But listen, you hear it all the time because it works. It engages the parasympathetic nervous system. It redirects and slows everything down. If you can just breathe in deeply 4 times. I know they say take a breath, but take 4. You can breathe in deeply for 4 seconds, hold for 7, and exhale for 8, like Dr. Andrew Weil suggests. Or you can do box breathing, where you breathe in for 6, hold for 6, breathe out for 6, hold for 6. Do whatever you like. Just focus on rhythmic breathing deeply. And if you do that for 4 times, it will begin to work you out of the rage monster scenario. It works. You hear it because it actually works. And by the way, if any of you do breathing exercises or breath work, let me see that in the comments. Yeah, I do breath work. It works for me. I'm just curious about that. It really works. Number 3, connect. Connect. We want to disconnect from the physicality of what anger does, right? We hate the feeling. As soon as we get that, we get hot, we feel the blood rushing, our mouths go dry, our hearts beat fast. It feels like we're almost outside of our body. Whatever those symptoms are, we hate it. But what we need to do is connect fully to the experience and the emotion. Hey, Jim, good to have you join us. Jim says, something I encounter is people try to intervene while I attempt to breathe, which then breaks the process. That's good, Jim. Yeah, you know what I do sometimes is when somebody says something to me that where I'm going into that place, I actually put my finger up and I'll say, give me a second, and then I'll breathe. And I'll let them see I'm breathing, because just the fact that I have to breathe at that moment suggests something that just happened isn't cool with me, okay? So even that can kind of aid in the whole environment that you're trying to set there. But yeah, Jim, it definitely happens. People want to go through handling anger much too quickly. And in fact, as soon as you get into the breath work and calm yourself down, that's when you can really begin articulating things. Sometimes we have responses and we don't even know what they are yet. This teaching is going to be a little longer tonight, but it's okay. Mikkel says, sometimes it feels like my body feels anger before my mind catches up. Yes. My jaw is clenched, my stomach is a knot, and my breath is stilted. Yes, Mikkel, definitely. Physically, your body feels it because your brain thin slices what it perceives to be a threat to your life before you even know what's going on. Before you feel anything emotionally, your body is feeling something physically. And you're in tune to it, but not on the conscious level, which is why when you say you feel it in your stomach and your jaws clench, these are why it's really important to constantly be connected to what your body is telling you, because your body will give you messages before your conscious mind even does sometimes. So it's very important. This is a holistic thing, right? We don't divide ourselves. It's the brain, it's the spirit, it's the body. No. We function as one. So when we feel this physical rush. Hey, Hammy, good to see you, Josh. Of emotion, the physical part of anger really only lasts 60 to 90 seconds. And I'm talking about what can be measured and what scientists say is that initial surge. It really only lasts 60 to 90 seconds. And if we are breathing during that time and connecting to what we're feeling, we can all endure that initial 90 seconds. And if we don't lose ourselves and keep feeding it where we stay at that state, we get our brains, as we used with our hands before. Again, you can do this on your own, which is why I love it. Then we get that prefrontal cortex closed back up so that the logical part of our brain can be making our decisions. It's these rhythms of anger that we actually need to welcome and to connect with. They come like waves sometimes at the shoreline. If you've ever been at the beach and you've seen the water come up and then it just lingers there for a second, right? When the wave comes up and then it pulls back. These are the rhythms. Connect with what is going on in your body and then name the emotion that you're feeling once you can breathe and be centered a bit. Name that emotion without judgment. Shauna Shapiro says mindfulness is paying attention with kindness and curiosity. I'm going to say that again. Mindfulness is paying attention with kindness and curiosity. Mindfulness engages that prefrontal cortex. When you connect to what you're feeling, then you can do the last part of this, which is look beneath. Now, relationship researcher John Gottman compares anger to an iceberg, which is 10% is above, okay, the surface and is visible, and about 90% is below. It's what's hidden underneath. Similarly, when we are angry, we have our point. So we make our point. I'm mad about this. I'm mad because he called this virus a Chinese virus. That's why I'm mad. That's my point. That's racist. Our country is completely down this racist road. That's my point, right? That's my point. But what's really going on underneath? There's a lot more going on underneath. Like, not only am I concerned for the larger picture of what I see in this country, but again, in the personal connection, my own family is Asian, right? So connecting to those unseen interests that are below the surface, the deeper hidden things, is what anger, when it's handled in a healthy way, actually provokes us to do. What is unseen? Like feeling disrespected or rejected or shamed or feel fearful or insecure or maybe just exhausted. I mean, is anybody else just freaking exhausted? We ask what is under the surface here that I need to see. And here's the thing, there's great wisdom in unpleasantness. I know we hate unpleasantness. We want to be comfortable. But if we'll only inquire as to what the Lord wants us to see and to learn. So let's look at anger not as something to be denied, not as something to be hidden and compartmentalized, but something that is useful when handled properly. And in this looking at the concept beneath, there's also even spiritual things that are deep in our lives that we can't fully see, layers of spiritual things that we don't know what's going on because we only see the tip of the iceberg. Elizabeth Elliot talks about watching, she's a phenomenal writer, talks about watching a shepherd debug the flock one time. And he crowds them into a small area and then dunks the sheep into this liquid and held them, even their noses, completely underneath, all the way underneath. Aaron is saying anger is a tension to manage, not a problem to fix. Absolutely. Attention to manage, not a problem. That sounds familiar. Not a problem to fix. That's good. You are absolutely right. Ryan says, I like unpleasantness. Comfortable makes me uncomfortable. Yeah, that's true. That's good. Good for you, Ryan. I hope I had something to do with that. So the pastor crowds them, or the shepherd crowds them into a small area and dunks the sheep into the liquid and holds them underneath. Now, what could the sheep be thinking? I'm going to die right now. So the sheep is fighting and trying to get out, not realizing that they're tormented by bugs and the shepherd is actually debugging them. In fact, there's a plan, and the sheep can't see what's beneath, just like our shepherd. Sometimes stuff happens, and we get angry, and we have our points, and we have our interests, which is what's underneath. But what we also need to understand is that the Lord is working in the underneath, and sometimes we can't fully see what's going on. If we get angry, we confess, we breathe, we connect, we look beneath when we feel the anger impulse. These things are what prevents us from converting explosive feelings into destructive feelings. Again, let me say this again. The 4 things we talked about tonight: confess, breathe, connect, look beneath. These are the things that prevent us from converting explosive feelings into destructive actions. If we make the experience of anger a more deliberate, conscious experience, we'll do less damage to ourselves and less damage to others. This is why one of Judaism's great medieval sages, Nachmanides, wrote in the 13th century, distance yourself from anger. Now, with all this talk of distance yourself from anger. It's so wise. Faith says, I feel so bad for these sheep right now. Yeah. Let's say that this was the shepherd that only used sheep for milk and for the wool too, Faith. Okay, so there was no ultimate death. This is a happy sheep farm. Okay, but yeah, we can all relate to the sheep, right? Nachmanides says, distance yourself from anger. Now, there's a lot in this that we can read, we can infer. He didn't tell us to suppress it. He didn't say don't ever feel it. He just said give yourself some time and some distance from anger. And if we want to truly manage that rage monster, especially in these times where literally stress is sitting on us right now, this is what we have to do: create some distance. So we're in this together. We're all feeling the same exact thing. So let's confess this to each other as I did tonight in my 2 examples. We're all struggling with becoming the rage monster. We all need each other's support in order to connect to these 4 or any other ways that work for you. Let's be honest, too, when we post and give our personal examples at the membership group, if we really want prayer for something. Okay, Kenny says, gulp, that is a hard one, but it makes sense. Yeah, it really does, right? And again, next week is going to be about righteous anger. So there is plenty to be loving the distance from anger. Karen saying, me too. That it's physical distance is really a cool image. There's plenty to be angry about right now in a righteous anger kind of way, the kind that's going to provoke us to do things about what we get angry about. That's fine. I'm not suggesting that that's what we're talking about tonight. We're going to talk about that next week. We get into trouble if we don't understand that too. So we have to be able to manage both kinds of anger. We're going to close this time with the lighting of the Shavuos candles. And traditionally, and again, this is Sabbath at sundown, and it's just such a beautiful thing to realize that every week at this time, it's a time to shut off our devices and to just have rest and only do things that we would call a Sabbath activity, which is something that brings joy and love and peace to you. And if it's anything else than that, we don't practice. My joke with my family is when they say, hey, did you hear? I always say, is this a Sabbath conversation? If it happens on the Sabbath. If not, let's wait till Sunday. We enter now into the Sabbath, and it's a time with these lights that represent love and joy and peace and rest. It is our time. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who helps us to be wise, compassionate, and healthy, who strengthens us to see truths and encourages us to do good. Shabbat Shalom. Love you all.